What if the secret to aging gracefully was sitting right on your plate? That question buzzed in Margaret Walker's mind like a tiny bee trapped in a teacup. It was 7:43 a.m., the kind of overcast Seattle morning that blurred the skyline into a soft watercolor. Rain tapped lightly against the kitchen window, and Margaret sat wrapped in a worn navy cardigan at her breakfast nook. A bowl of bran cereal sat soggy in front of her. She'd stared at it for 10 minutes without lifting a spoon. Another morning. Another quiet. Another ache in her knee. 72. That number felt like a slow sentence. Not a death sentence, she wasn't melodramatic, but more like the dull ache of a slow fade. No excitement, no energy. Her kids had their own lives in San Diego and Portland. She didn't blame them. But the calls were less frequent, the holidays shorter, and the space between visits, wider. She glanced at her iPad on the table, a screen she mostly used for crossword puzzles and news articles from the Seattle Times. Out of habit, she opened a lifestyle news app and began scrolling. Cats wearing sweaters, more headlines about rising grocery prices, and there. May Musk, 76, walks Paris runway, and shares her 3 daily superfoods. Margaret blinked. May Musk? Wasn't that Elon Musk's mother? She remembered the name vaguely from a documentary about the tech billionaire. But a runway model at 76. She tapped on the article. A vibrant photo loaded, May in a silver evening gown, striding down a Paris runway like she owned it. Her short white hair framed her face, sharp and proud. Elegant. Powerful. I eat with intention, the quote read beneath the photo. Food is my fuel, not my reward. I focus on 3 staples that give me strength, clarity, and joy. Margaret exhaled slowly. How is she doing that? She scrolled further, but the article offered only hints. A creamy green fruit, a vibrant root vegetable, a humble protein powerhouse. Clickbait. The comments were flooded with guesses: avocados, lentils, beets. But Margaret wasn't interested in guessing games. She was captivated by something else entirely, the fire in May's eyes. It wasn't just the makeup or the lights. It was vitality. It was purpose. Margaret looked back at her cereal. It stared back like beige sludge. That moment was small. Unremarkable. But something shifted. A whisper. A nudge. She pushed the bowl away and stood up. Her knees cracked like bubble wrap. She moved toward the pantry, pulled open the door, and stared inside. Cans, boxes, decades-old tins. Nothing looked particularly fueling. But what if? What if it wasn't too late? She padded over to her desk and opened her email. To May@muskmodel.com. Subject: Your story inspired me. Dear May. I saw your article this morning and just had to write. I'm 72, retired, and feeling more tired than retired most days. But your photo, your strength, it shook me awake. If you're willing, I'd love to know what exactly you're eating that makes you feel that way. I want to feel alive again. Sincerely. Margaret Walker. Seattle, Washington. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. Margaret knew the odds of a reply were slim to none. Elon Musk's mother surely had a sea of admirers, media requests, and runway fittings to deal with, not emails from retired grandmothers in rainy cities. Still, it felt good to ask. By noon, she'd almost forgotten she'd sent it. Almost. That night, the rain came harder. The wind howled like a lonely train down her street. Margaret curled under her blanket, Netflix humming in the background. But her mind kept returning to that photo. Not to the gown or the glamour, but the posture. The energy. Her fingers itched toward the iPad again. She opened YouTube and searched. May Musk diet interview. Video thumbnails popped up, TEDx talks, health conferences, and an old interview with the Today Show. Margaret clicked on one where May sat across from Hoda Kotb, dressed in a soft blue suit. "What keeps you going?" Hoda asked. May smiled. "I love what I do, and I take care of my body like it's a business. I eat healthy fats, fiber-rich legumes, and deeply pigmented veggies. But more than that, I believe in myself." That was the part Margaret didn't know how to do. She paused the video and looked at herself in the reflection of the screen. Loose skin, deep-set lines. But beneath the wrinkles were eyes still curious. Still alive. Suddenly, as if out of nowhere, she spoke aloud. "Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from," she mimicked the YouTuber's voice, laughing softly to herself. "What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?" She whispered, "Hope." Then she opened the Notes app and typed one sentence. "Tomorrow, I find my 3 foods." Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Margaret Walker woke up the next morning with a surprising sense of purpose. The rain had stopped, but the grayness remained, like a blanket that had been left too long. Yet, instead of feeling tired, she felt awake. Ready. It wasn't the same old sluggish morning where the only thing on her mind was a cup of coffee to start her day. No, today felt different. She stretched, groaning as her joints popped, but a little less stiff than usual. A small victory, she thought. Maybe, just maybe, there was something to this eating with intention idea. She headed into the kitchen and made a mental note: today was the day I start my search for May Musk's 3 foods. It was ridiculous, really. A woman she'd never met, who lived halfway across the world, had somehow inspired her to change everything. But the reality was hard to ignore. Here was a woman, someone older, wiser, who had defied the conventional expectations of aging. She was living proof that age wasn't a limit. It was an opportunity. Margaret grabbed a quick breakfast, Greek yogurt with honey and a handful of almonds. Simple. Tasty. It wasn't the flashy start she had imagined, but it was a start. She felt a spark, like a match had been struck inside her. Around midday, Margaret found herself staring at the familiar square shape of her computer screen, watching a TEDx video of May Musk. She had watched so many videos of May in the past day that she felt like she knew her already. The confidence. The discipline. The sense of humor that shone through in everything she did. The video was titled, "How I Stay Strong in My 70s, A Model's Journey to Wellness." May sat with a calm, centered demeanor, her short silver hair framing her face with elegance. "People think aging means slowing down," May began, her voice both gentle and commanding. "But it's all about knowing what your body needs and nourishing it with the right things. We feed our hearts, our minds, and our souls with what we put on our plates." Margaret could feel a wave of emotion build in her chest. It wasn't just about food, it was about respecting the body, about understanding that the choices we make today could change everything tomorrow. May went on to list the 3 foods that she ate every day: avocados, lentils, and beets. Margaret paused the video and clicked back into her browser. She opened up a new tab and typed, "Health benefits of avocados." It wasn't that Margaret didn't know about avocados. She'd seen them all over the place, especially at her local grocery store in the fancy health section. But she had always written them off as too expensive or too trendy. The idea that something as simple as a green fruit could change her life seemed absurd. Yet, after hearing May speak so passionately, Margaret felt an itch to give it a try. She made a quick list on a notepad. Avocados, good fats, heart healthy, brain boosting. Lentils, protein, fiber, blood sugar regulation. Beets, detoxifying, good for blood pressure and energy. It sounded doable. She didn't need to go on a fancy diet or buy expensive supplements. She just needed to make smarter choices. She could start small, right? By the time she was ready for lunch, she decided to try out her first, May-inspired, recipe. She grabbed an avocado and sliced it open. The creamy green interior beckoned her. She mashed half of it onto a whole grain toast and topped it with a sprinkle of sea salt and a dash of olive oil. Margaret knew it was simple, but it felt new. It felt intentional. She took her first bite. The richness of the avocado melted on her tongue, the salt just enough to heighten the flavor. It was almost too easy. Could it be this simple? Her mind wandered back to her own life, her children, her late husband, the years of running on autopilot. She hadn't taken care of herself the way she had taken care of others. And now was the time to change that. After lunch, Margaret decided to do something she hadn't done in a while. She went outside for a walk. It wasn't long. Just a quick loop around the block, feeling the cold air on her face. But it felt good. More than good. It felt like a victory. When she got back home, she received a notification on her phone. Email from May Musk. Margaret's heart skipped a beat as she opened the message. It was short and sweet, exactly what she needed to hear. Dear Margaret. Thank you for reaching out. I'm so glad to hear that my story resonated with you. Remember, it's never too late to start. Begin with one small change and build from there. Good luck, and remember to be kind to yourself. Best. May. She read it again. And then once more. Margaret smiled to herself. It wasn't a life-changing email. There were no grand promises. But it was enough to keep her moving forward. Maybe it really wasn't too late. Maybe the best was yet to come. That night, as she prepared a simple dinner of lentils with roasted vegetables, Margaret couldn't help but feel a new sense of excitement about the future. It was as if, after years of feeling like an afterthought, she was finally reclaiming her place in the world. The next morning, she would try the beets. And maybe, just maybe, she would finally start to feel strong again. Margaret's routine was simple. She wasn't trying to reinvent the wheel, just trying to bring a little joy back into her life. Each day felt like a tiny victory, a new step forward, but she was determined to keep going. The avocado toast had been a hit, the lentil soup had left her feeling surprisingly energized, and now it was time for the next ingredient in May Musk's three-food miracle, beets. She had always heard that beets were good for you, of course. But that was about it. The few times she tried them, they had been either pickled or buried under layers of sugar and vinegar. She didn't love the taste, but she didn't hate it either. Still, the idea of adding them to her diet on a regular basis felt like a challenge. But then, something happened. It was a Wednesday morning when Margaret received the latest issue of Good Health Monthly in the mail. She wasn't expecting anything groundbreaking. Just the usual assortment of fitness tips, trendy diet fads, and a handful of inspirational stories about people who had transformed their lives. But this time, the cover caught her eye. How to Age Like a Pro, Secrets from the World's Healthiest Seniors. Margaret smiled. Another article promising the fountain of youth. Still, it had May Musk's face on the cover, her silver hair gleaming in the light. Margaret's interest was piqued. She flipped it open. The first few pages were filled with advice that sounded nice but didn't speak to her. Start your day with gratitude, meditate for 15 minutes, get 8 hours of sleep every night. Sure, it was all well and good, but she was more interested in practical, tangible changes. Something she could sink her teeth into. As she flipped further, she found a section titled, The 3 Foods That Keep May Musk Strong. She couldn't help but smile as she read the heading. Of course, it was the same 3 foods she'd been reading about the day before. But now, the article included more details. More context. More science. May's words in the article echoed what she had said in the video, I choose food that fuels me, not food that weighs me down. The key is simplicity, 3 foods I rely on every day to feel my best. But the article went a step further, explaining the benefits of each food in greater depth. Avocados, high in healthy fats, they were essential for brain function, heart health, and even skin elasticity. They provided steady energy and kept hunger at bay for longer periods of time. Lentils, packed with protein and fiber, lentils were essential for maintaining muscle mass and stabilizing blood sugar. They also helped with digestion, making them the perfect food for overall wellness. And then came the beets. According to the article, beets were more than just a trendy vegetable. They were packed with nitrates, which helped improve blood flow and lower blood pressure. The natural sugars in beets also provided a slow release of energy, keeping you sharp and focused throughout the day. But it wasn't just physical health. Beets were also linked to improved mental clarity, cognitive function, and even mood regulation. Margaret stared at the article, letting it sink in. It wasn't just that these foods were healthy, they were incredibly smart choices. And best of all, they weren't fads. They were simple, natural, and backed by science. Inspired by the article, Margaret made her way to the farmer's market that afternoon. She had never been a regular at the market, but today, the idea of freshly grown produce felt like the right choice. She strolled through the booths, listening to the sounds of people chatting, the hum of organic produce being handed from vendor to customer. She could smell the earthy aroma of freshly picked vegetables, and there, right in front of her, was a display of beautiful, deep purple beets. She picked up a few, their smooth skin almost glowing in the afternoon light. It was time to see what all the fuss was about. That evening, Margaret peeled the beets carefully and roasted them in the oven, cutting them into wedges and drizzling them with olive oil, salt, and a sprinkle of rosemary. The smell filled her kitchen, earthy and warm. When they were done, she tossed them with a little feta cheese and arugula, making a simple salad that felt like a gift to herself. She took her first bite, and nothing happened. No sudden epiphany, no instant burst of energy. Just a mild, earthy flavor that she didn't mind at all. The real change wasn't in the taste, it was in the way she felt afterward. Light, but satisfied. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel the urge to snack, to reach for something sweet or salty. She felt, well, balanced. It was as though her body was already responding to the changes, without her even realizing it. The next day, Margaret received another unexpected email. This time, it was from a familiar name, Elon Musk. She opened the message with trembling hands, half expecting it to be some sort of joke. But as she read, she realized it was real. Dear Margaret, I saw your message to my mother, and I just wanted to let you know how proud I am of her. She's inspired many people, including myself. I hope you continue your journey toward better health and that you find joy in every step. Best wishes. Elon Musk. Margaret blinked at the screen, her heart racing. Elon Musk? The Elon Musk? What were the chances? But it was a sign, wasn't it? A reminder that the small things, the little decisions she was making, were adding up. As the days passed, Margaret felt something shift inside her. It wasn't immediate. It wasn't dramatic. But there was a quiet strength growing within her. The food was fueling her, yes, but it was also something else. Something deeper. A realization that it wasn't just about how long you lived, it was about how you lived. And she was starting to live, really live, again. It had been a week since Margaret had started her new routine, eating avocados, lentils, and beets. She could feel something small but significant happening within her. It wasn't as though she'd suddenly transformed into a new person, but there was a subtle shift. Her energy levels were rising, and her mornings no longer felt like an uphill climb. She felt lighter, both physically and mentally. The small changes were starting to add up. That morning, she stood in front of the bathroom mirror, brushing her teeth, and noticed something she hadn't in a long time, her reflection seemed different. There was a spark in her eyes, a slight lift to her posture. The lines on her face hadn't disappeared, but there was a certain softness to them, a quiet strength that hadn't been there before. Margaret paused, toothbrush in hand. She wasn't used to acknowledging these little victories. For so many years, her focus had been on other people, her children, her late husband, her friends, but now, she was beginning to notice herself again. It was a chilly morning in Seattle, and Margaret was eager to try a new recipe. She had a bag of frozen lentils in the freezer, and today, she would make a hearty lentil stew. Her body craved warmth, and the smell of simmering food would be the perfect start to the day. She chopped onions, garlic, carrots, and celery, letting them sizzle in the pot with olive oil. The steam rose, filling the kitchen with the familiar, comforting scent of a homemade meal. As the vegetables softened, Margaret added the lentils, a handful of diced tomatoes, and vegetable broth. She let it simmer while she set the table, her mind racing with the possibilities of the future. She was starting to feel more like her old self, stronger, sharper, more present. By mid-morning, after finishing her stew, Margaret decided to take a walk. It wasn't long, just around the block, but she felt an undeniable urge to get outside, to feel the fresh air against her skin. The city felt alive with energy, the sidewalks wet from a light drizzle. The occasional car passed by, but for the most part, it was quiet, peaceful. As she walked, she noticed a few things. The birds were singing more than she remembered. The leaves on the trees were turning a vibrant shade of red and orange. The world was changing, and somehow, so was she. Each step felt purposeful, as though she were moving toward something new. She walked a little faster now, her legs feeling stronger, the rhythm of her steps syncing with her breath. She smiled as she realized she wasn't just walking for the sake of it. She was walking because she had the energy to do so. When she reached her front door, she realized that, for the first time in years, she hadn't been distracted by thoughts of aches and pains or the uncertainty of what tomorrow would bring. She was simply present, living in the moment, fully aware of the world around her. Back inside, Margaret sat at her desk and stared at her phone, the same phone that had sent her an email from Elon Musk just a few days earlier. She'd been meaning to reply to his message, but something had stopped her. She wasn't sure if she had the right words, or if it was even necessary. But today, something inside her urged her to respond. She opened a new email and began typing. Dear Elon. Thank you so much for your message. It meant more to me than I can put into words. I've been working on making small changes in my life, changes that, like you said, have started to add up. I'm eating better, moving more, and beginning to feel like myself again. I hope one day I can be as strong as your mother, both inside and out. Thank you again. Margaret. It felt good to send it. Maybe she didn't have all the answers, but she was on the right track. It wasn't about having everything figured out, it was about taking that first step and trusting that the rest would follow. That afternoon, she received another email. This time, it was from a local yoga studio. Margaret had passed by the studio many times, always admiring the peace and tranquility that seemed to radiate from within. She had never set foot inside, though. Yoga had always seemed like something for younger people or those who were already in peak physical condition. But as she read the email, which offered a discount for first-time clients, something clicked. Why not? She thought. Why not try? She signed up for the beginner's class that evening. The yoga class was everything she had hoped for and more. It wasn't about perfect poses or competing with anyone else, it was about listening to her body and being present. The instructor was kind and patient, guiding them through simple stretches and breathing exercises that helped Margaret feel connected to her body in a way she hadn't in years. After class, she felt lighter, both physically and mentally. The soreness in her muscles was comforting, as though she had worked hard in a way that nourished her instead of draining her. She left the studio with a smile on her face, feeling a quiet sense of accomplishment. Later that evening, as Margaret prepared a light dinner of roasted vegetables and quinoa, she thought about the past few weeks. The small changes, eating more intentionally, walking, practicing yoga, had begun to add up in ways she hadn't expected. She didn't feel the urge to do everything all at once. She just knew that she was making progress. Day by day, step by step. She had started this journey with a simple question: what if aging didn't mean slowing down? Now, she had an answer. Aging didn't have to be about slowing down. It was about moving forward, in every sense of the word. It was about embracing change, feeling your strength grow, and knowing that you still had so much to offer the world. As she ate her dinner, she felt a sense of contentment settle over her. There was still so much more to do, but for now, she was exactly where she needed to be. Margaret had never been one to attract attention. She preferred to stay under the radar, quietly going about her life. But something about the changes she had begun to make was beginning to stand out, not just to herself, but to the people around her as well. It had started subtly. At first, her daughter, Emma, had commented on how much more energy Margaret seemed to have. "You're looking more like yourself, Mom," Emma had said, her voice filled with surprise, as though she hadn't realized how much her mother had been running on empty for so long. Margaret had smiled at her daughter's observation but hadn't made much of it. She was used to being overlooked, to blending into the background. But now, things were different. It wasn't just the physical changes, there was something about her presence that felt fuller, more vibrant. It was the same at her weekly book club meeting. When she walked into the room, she noticed the way the group's conversation paused for a split second. People looked up from their books, giving her an almost appraising glance, as though they were seeing her for the first time. "Margaret, you look great. Have you been doing something different?" one of the women, Linda, asked, eyeing her with curiosity. Margaret hesitated. She wasn't used to compliments, especially ones that seemed to come from nowhere. But she nodded, a modest smile creeping across her face. "I've been making some changes. Eating a little better, getting outside more, trying to stay active." Linda raised an eyebrow. "Well, it's clearly working. You seem different. In a good way." Margaret felt a little flush of pride, but she quickly brushed it off. "Just little things, really. Nothing major." But it was major. To her, it felt monumental. Each day that passed, Margaret felt herself becoming more and more aware of the power of small, consistent changes. It wasn't about dramatic, overnight transformations, it was about giving herself permission to live fully, without apology. A few days later, she found herself at the grocery store, picking up the usual fruits and vegetables when she noticed something new. At the end of the produce aisle, there was a display of fresh beets, deep red, earthy, and inviting. She picked up a few bunches, running her fingers over the smooth, vibrant skin. It felt good to know that she was intentionally choosing foods that would nourish her body. As she stood in line, placing her items on the conveyor belt, she overheard a conversation between two women ahead of her. They were talking about the importance of healthy eating and the benefits of various superfoods. "Have you heard of the 3 foods that May Musk eats every day?" one of the women asked. Margaret's ears perked up. The mention of May's name was like a magnet, pulling her into the conversation. She leaned slightly forward, eager to hear more. "Oh yes," the other woman replied. "She eats avocados, lentils, and beets. Apparently, those are her secrets for staying so strong and healthy at her age." Margaret couldn't resist. "Excuse me," she interjected. "I couldn't help but overhear. I've actually been following May Musk's advice about those 3 foods. And I have to say, they really do make a difference." The women turned to her, surprise flickering across their faces. "Really? That's amazing. You look so energetic." Margaret smiled, feeling a sense of empowerment. "It's true. It's all about making small changes. It's not about perfection, just progress." As she walked out of the store, her mind swirled with the thought of how easily people were influenced by others, how quickly a small ripple could turn into a wave. Just by changing her own habits, she had sparked a conversation, started a chain of curiosity that she couldn't have predicted. And it made her realize something important: change wasn't just about herself anymore. It was about inspiring others, too. That evening, as Margaret prepared a beetroot salad with walnuts and goat cheese, she reflected on the ripple effect she was beginning to create. It wasn't just about what she had done for herself, it was about the influence she could have on others. The changes she was making were not isolated to her own life, they were reaching out, touching the lives of the people around her. As she savored her dinner, she thought about the friends she had been neglecting, the people she had once been so close to but had lost touch with over the years. Maybe it was time to reach out. Maybe it was time to share her journey, not as a way to boast, but as an invitation for others to take a step toward better health. The next morning, Margaret called up her old friend Diane, someone she hadn't spoken to in ages. Diane had been a constant presence in her life for years, but somehow, their paths had drifted apart. Diane had always been the life of the party, someone who could make anyone laugh, but the last time they'd talked, Diane had sounded worn out, as though life was weighing heavily on her. Margaret hesitated for a moment before dialing her number, wondering if it was too soon. But then she remembered something Musk had said in an interview: it's never too late to make a change. The first step is reaching out. Diane picked up on the third ring. "Diane, it's Margaret," she said, trying to keep her voice light and cheerful. "Margaret. Oh my gosh, it's been forever. How are you?" Diane's voice was warm, but there was a slight edge of exhaustion to it. "I'm doing better than ever, actually," Margaret said, her voice bubbling with newfound energy. "I've been making some changes, eating better, moving more. I've been feeling great, and I just thought I'd reach out. I miss our old times." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Diane sighed. "You know, Margaret, I've been feeling kind of stuck lately. Maybe you're onto something. I'd love to hear more." The conversation turned into a long chat about health, change, and new beginnings. As they spoke, Margaret realized something: she wasn't just changing her own life. She was helping others do the same. And it felt good. That evening, Margaret sat down at her kitchen table, a warm cup of tea in hand, and smiled. She had been so focused on her own transformation that she hadn't fully realized the ripple effect she was creating. By simply taking control of her health, by embracing the small changes, she was inspiring those around her, whether she realized it or not. She wasn't just a passive observer of her own life anymore. She was an active participant, carving out a path not just for herself, but for the people who might look at her one day and think, maybe I can do that too. And that, Margaret realized, was the true power of change. It wasn't just about the food. It was about the courage to take that first step. And by doing so, she was helping others find the courage to take theirs. Margaret woke up early the next morning, the crisp morning air rushing through her open window. It was the kind of day where everything felt right, peaceful, calm, and full of possibility. As she stretched and glanced at the clock, she realized that she had awoken before her alarm. For someone who had struggled to get up in the mornings just a few weeks ago, this felt like a small triumph. Her body felt light, her mind clear. It wasn't just the food she had been eating, it was the rhythm of life that had begun to fall into place. Every little action, from the meals she prepared to the walks she took, was contributing to something greater, a feeling of purpose she hadn't experienced in years. This morning was different, though. She wasn't just moving through the motions. She had an intention: she was going to take her newfound energy and make something meaningful of it. After a quick breakfast of avocado toast and a cup of green tea, she opened her laptop and began drafting an email to an old acquaintance. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment as she thought about the message she wanted to send. What if I could help someone else? What if I could do more than just change my own life, she wondered. It had been months since Margaret had last communicated with Dr. Thomas, a former colleague from her career in teaching. They hadn't been close, but they shared a deep mutual respect for each other's work. Dr. Thomas had always been passionate about public health and wellness, and Margaret admired his drive and vision. The thought of reaching out to him had always been there, but now, with her own transformation unfolding in front of her, she felt ready. She started typing. Dear Dr. Thomas. I hope this message finds you well. I wanted to reach out and share something that's been on my mind lately. Over the past few months, I've made some significant changes in my life, and I feel like I'm gaining a deeper sense of purpose in the process. I've been focusing on improving my health by eating better, staying active, and engaging in new habits that support a more vibrant lifestyle. I'd love to reconnect and see if there might be opportunities for us to collaborate on promoting wellness in our community. Looking forward to hearing from you. Margaret. It felt good to write that. She wasn't just asking for advice or offering her own, it was more than that. It was an invitation. An invitation to step into something bigger than herself. As the day went on, Margaret went about her usual routine, walking, cooking, spending time on herself, but there was an undeniable sense of purpose in everything she did. Even the simplest of actions, like cleaning out her pantry or chopping vegetables, felt imbued with meaning. It wasn't just about eating the right foods or exercising. It was about living a life that made sense to her. A life that reflected her values and aspirations. But something was still missing. Something bigger than the small changes she had made so far. Later that afternoon, Margaret decided to visit her daughter, Emma. She had mentioned to her a few days ago that she was planning on making some big changes in her life, and Emma had been supportive, but Margaret hadn't fully explained what she meant. When Margaret arrived at Emma's apartment, she was greeted with a warm hug. Emma's apartment was cozy, filled with books and framed photos of family trips and celebrations. You look fantastic, Mom. Emma said, stepping back to take a good look at her mother. I can't believe the transformation. I'm so proud of you. Margaret smiled. It felt good to hear the words, especially coming from her daughter. But today, Margaret had something more to share. Thank you, Emma. But I've been thinking. I'm starting to realize that this is about more than just me now, Margaret said, settling into the couch. I want to do something that could help others too. I'm thinking about how I could reach out to people in the community and share what I've learned. Maybe I could even start a wellness program for seniors, something that focuses on eating well and staying active. Emma's eyes lit up. Mom, that sounds amazing. You've always been a great teacher. I think it's the perfect time for you to take that step. Margaret's heart fluttered with excitement. She had been holding herself back for so long, telling herself that it was too late for big changes. But maybe it wasn't too late after all. Maybe this was the perfect time. Maybe you're right, Margaret said, her voice filled with determination. I've been thinking a lot about what I want to leave behind. I want to inspire others, especially people my age, to take control of their health. It's not just about living longer, it's about living better. I've learned that firsthand. That night, as Margaret sat in her living room, reflecting on her conversation with Emma, she felt a quiet sense of fulfillment. She had always been focused on taking care of others, her children, her late husband, her friends, but now, she was focused on herself in a way that felt empowering. For so long, she had been uncertain of her place in the world. But now, with this new sense of purpose, she felt like she was finally beginning to understand what it meant to live a life of significance. It wasn't about fame or accolades, it was about making a difference, no matter how small. And with each step she took, whether it was eating better, staying active, or reaching out to those around her, she was slowly building the foundation for something bigger. Something that would have a lasting impact. The following morning, Margaret received an email from Dr. Thomas. He was eager to reconnect and suggested they meet for coffee the following week to discuss possible collaborations. The moment she saw his message, a wave of excitement washed over her. This was it, the beginning of something new. She spent the rest of the morning preparing for their meeting, researching wellness programs and ideas that could help the local community. Margaret realized that she was no longer just a participant in her own life, she was an active creator of her future. And for the first time in years, she felt alive in a way she hadn't before. She wasn't waiting for change to happen. She was making it happen, one small decision at a time. Margaret sat at the small cafe, nervously stirring her coffee. The warmth of the mug seeped through her fingers, grounding her in the moment. The meeting with Dr. Thomas was more than just a professional discussion, it felt like a turning point. She had been contemplating how she could use her experiences to help others for some time, but now it was becoming real. This could be the first step towards something bigger. The bell above the door jingled, and Dr. Thomas walked in. He was a tall man with graying hair and a warm, approachable smile. He spotted Margaret immediately and made his way over to her table. "Margaret. It's been too long," he said, extending a hand. "I'm glad you reached out." Margaret smiled, shaking his hand. "I'm glad we could meet up. I've been thinking a lot about what you've done in the community, and I thought maybe there's a way I could contribute too." Dr. Thomas took a seat across from her, setting down his briefcase. "I'm interested to hear what you have in mind. You know, I've always believed that health is about more than just physical fitness. It's about mindset, community, and the kind of care we give ourselves every day. You're absolutely right to want to share this with others." Margaret's heart swelled with pride. Dr. Thomas had always been a big advocate for community health, and hearing his validation gave her the confidence she needed. "Well, I've been focusing a lot on my own health recently, diet, exercise, mindfulness, and I've started to feel better than I have in years. I was thinking about how many people, especially seniors, don't prioritize their well-being until it's too late. Maybe I could create a program or support group that focuses on how small changes can lead to big improvements," Margaret said, her voice steady but full of excitement. Dr. Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "I think that's a brilliant idea. Seniors, in particular, can sometimes feel isolated or disconnected from the wellness conversation, especially when it comes to things like nutrition and fitness. A program that emphasizes accessible, practical steps could have a significant impact." Margaret leaned forward, her hands resting on the table. "I want to focus on the little things, foods that support longevity, simple exercises, and ways to stay engaged with life. It's not about quick fixes, it's about creating habits that can sustain them for the long haul." Dr. Thomas's eyes lit up. "You've got the right mindset. And the community needs more of this. I'd love to help you get started. Maybe we could partner on this?" Margaret's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected him to offer his help so quickly, but the idea of working with Dr. Thomas, someone she respected so much, was exhilarating. "I'd love that," she said. "I've been hesitant to take that first step, but with your experience and support, I feel like we could really make a difference." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of preparation and planning. Dr. Thomas introduced Margaret to several colleagues who were also passionate about wellness, and together they began brainstorming ideas for the program. Margaret was amazed at how quickly everything fell into place. They started with the basics, a monthly seminar series for seniors, focusing on nutrition, simple exercises, and the importance of mental well-being. As the program began to take shape, Margaret spent her evenings putting together materials and researching the latest wellness trends. She felt more alive than she had in years, her mind constantly buzzing with ideas. Each day, she grew more certain that this was the right path for her. But it wasn't without its challenges. One afternoon, as Margaret was preparing for a seminar, she received a phone call from Emma. Her daughter's voice was filled with concern. "Mom, I need to talk to you about something. It's about your program. I think it's great that you're doing this, but I've heard from a few of your friends that you're pushing yourself too hard. You're working late into the night, and you don't seem to be resting enough," Emma said, her voice tinged with worry. Margaret paused, her mind racing. I'm fine, Emma. I'm just excited about this, and I don't want to let anything slip through the cracks. I know, Mom, but I just don't want you to burn out. You've been through so much already, and I can't bear the thought of you getting overwhelmed again. Maybe you should slow down a bit. Margaret's heart ached. She knew Emma was only looking out for her, but it was hard to hear. She had worked so hard to build this momentum, to prove to herself that she was capable of something big. To slow down now felt like a setback. I'll be okay, Margaret said, forcing a smile. This is important to me. I'm doing something meaningful. I'm helping people. I get that, Mom, but you have to take care of yourself first. If you're not well, you won't be able to help anyone else. Remember, this journey is about balance, not burnout, Emma replied gently. Margaret knew her daughter was right. The last thing she wanted was to go back to feeling burnt out, to fall back into the unhealthy patterns that had held her back for so long. But part of her was afraid that if she didn't push hard enough, she wouldn't succeed. She sighed, glancing at the calendar on her wall. You're right, Emma. I'll try to find a better balance. I don't want to lose sight of the purpose of this. The conversation with Emma lingered in Margaret's mind for days. She began to recognize the truth in her daughter's words. She had come so far by making small, consistent changes, and those changes were sustainable. But if she continued to push herself too hard, too fast, it could all fall apart. Margaret decided to make some adjustments. She started by setting clear boundaries, leaving time in her schedule for rest and reflection. She also enlisted help, reaching out to the colleagues Dr. Thomas had introduced her to, asking them to take on some of the responsibilities for the program. As she made these adjustments, she felt the weight begin to lift. It wasn't about doing everything on her own. It was about creating something sustainable, something that could continue even after she had stepped back a little. Weeks later, as Margaret stood in front of a room full of seniors at her first wellness seminar, she couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. The program was taking off, and the impact was already palpable. The seniors were engaged, asking questions, sharing their experiences. It was exactly what she had hoped for. And in that moment, Margaret realized something important. The road to change wasn't always straight, and it wasn't always easy. But it was always worth it. She wasn't just helping others change their lives, she was changing hers too. As Margaret continued to develop the wellness program, she found herself at a crossroads. Everything was progressing so well, and she had never felt so fulfilled, but it wasn't long before she realized that her journey toward creating something meaningful wasn't as smooth as she had hoped. The first unexpected challenge came when she learned that not all of the seniors she was working with were as receptive to the changes she was suggesting. Despite the success stories of others, some attendees resisted the idea of shifting their diets or becoming more physically active. Some of them were skeptical, others outright dismissive. Margaret sat in the small community center office late one evening, reviewing the feedback from the first seminar. She had asked participants for anonymous surveys after the event, eager to gauge their reactions. A large portion of the responses had been positive, with seniors expressing gratitude for the new ideas and advice. But a few responses stood out, and they were difficult to ignore. I've been doing fine for years without this new age nonsense, one response read. It's too much work. I don't have the energy for all this healthy eating and exercise, another wrote. The doubt crept in. Margaret wasn't used to dealing with resistance. Over the years, she had built her career on helping others grow, guiding them through challenges and encouraging them to step out of their comfort zones. But this felt different. This was her own idea, her own dream, and she couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't enough. As she stared at the papers scattered across the desk, her phone buzzed. It was Emma. Hi, Mom. How's the program going? Margaret hesitated for a moment. Should she tell Emma about the doubts creeping in? Should she admit that she was feeling frustrated and unsure? Hey, Emma. It's going okay. Some of the feedback I've been getting is good, but there's definitely some resistance. A lot of the seniors don't want to change their routines, and it's hard to get them on board. Emma's voice was calm and encouraging. Mom, that's completely normal. Change is hard, especially for people who've been living a certain way for so long. But don't let that get you down. You're doing amazing work, and it will take time. Just keep showing up and be patient. It's all part of the process. Margaret smiled at her daughter's words, though the weight on her shoulders didn't immediately lift. She knew Emma was right. Change did take time. But Margaret couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency. She wanted to make a difference, now. Thanks, Emma. I just don't want to lose momentum. I feel like this could really help so many people if they just give it a chance. I know, Mom. Just keep at it. One step at a time. The people who are meant to benefit from this will come around. Trust the process. Margaret sat quietly after the call ended, reflecting on her daughter's advice. Slowly, she realized that this challenge wasn't just about the program, it was about her own growth. She had been so eager to push forward and prove herself that she hadn't fully accounted for the difficulty of changing ingrained habits and mindsets. But the resistance wasn't a sign of failure, it was a sign that she was on the right path. When change is hard, it means you're challenging something deep. That challenge, she reminded herself, was the heart of the work. The next seminar was scheduled for the following week, and Margaret made some changes to her approach. Instead of just lecturing about the importance of exercise and healthy eating, she decided to share her personal journey. She'd been through the same struggles herself, the skepticism, the fear of trying something new, and the doubts that clouded her mind. But the changes she'd made had changed her life, and she wanted to show the seniors that it was never too late to start. When the day of the seminar arrived, Margaret walked into the room with a new sense of purpose. She wasn't there to convince anyone. She was there to share her story, her experiences, and offer support to anyone who wanted it. She wasn't pushing. She was inviting. The seniors gathered in the same circle as before, and Margaret could see that some of them were still skeptical. But there was something different this time. Maybe it was the way she spoke, or the calm, measured confidence in her voice. Whatever it was, the atmosphere felt less tense. After a brief introduction, Margaret shared her journey. Many of you know I've been on a wellness journey for the past few months, she began, her voice steady but warm. When I first started, I had a lot of doubts. I thought, I'm too old for this. It's too late to change. But I was wrong. I learned that it's never too late to start. I made small, simple changes. I started eating better, moving more, and surrounding myself with people who supported my journey. And while it hasn't been easy, I can honestly say that my life is better for it. She paused, allowing the words to settle. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, this isn't for me. And that's okay. You don't have to change everything at once. You can start with small steps. Maybe it's eating one healthy meal a day, or taking a short walk in the morning. The point is, you don't have to do it all at once. Just start. There was a shift in the room. Margaret could feel it, an openness, a slight easing of the tension. One of the seniors, an older man with glasses, raised his hand. You really think it's that easy? Margaret smiled. It can be. But the first step is always the hardest. Once you start, it gets easier. Slowly, other hands went up. People began asking questions, sharing their own stories, and discussing what they were struggling with. Margaret could feel the energy in the room shift from skepticism to curiosity. She knew she couldn't change everyone's mind in one session, but this was progress. By the end of the seminar, Margaret felt a sense of accomplishment. It hadn't been perfect, but it had been real. She had connected with the seniors in a way she hadn't before. And while not everyone was ready to make changes, she knew she had planted a seed. That night, Margaret sat down with a cup of tea and reflected on the day. She realized that the biggest lesson she had learned so far wasn't about nutrition or exercise, it was about patience. Change took time, and not everyone would be ready to embrace it right away. She wasn't just helping others transform, she was transforming herself. As the weeks passed, Margaret's wellness program continued to evolve. The seniors who attended her seminars had begun to adopt small changes, whether it was incorporating more vegetables into their meals, taking short walks in the morning, or simply drinking more water. Each day felt like a new victory, even if it was just a single participant who showed up with a smile and a story of success. But even as her confidence grew, the reality of balancing the program with her personal life was becoming harder to manage. The strain of organizing the seminars, creating new content, and supporting the seniors was taking a toll on Margaret's time and energy. She found herself working late into the night again, caught in a whirlwind of to-do lists and deadlines. One evening, as she sat in her office, trying to finalize the plans for the next seminar, her phone buzzed again. It was Emma. "Hey, Mom. You look exhausted," Emma's voice said through the phone. Margaret had tried to hide her exhaustion, but Emma could always tell. "I'm just checking in. How's everything going with the program?" Margaret sighed, rubbing her eyes. "It's going well, but I'm starting to feel like I'm running on empty. There's so much to do, and I want to make sure everything is perfect. I don't want to let anyone down." "You're doing amazing, Mom. But you've got to take care of yourself too. Have you thought about asking for help?" Margaret paused. Help. The idea felt foreign to her. She had always prided herself on doing things on her own, being the one everyone could rely on. Asking for help meant admitting that she couldn't do it all. But Emma's words lingered in her mind. Maybe she didn't have to do everything by herself. "You're right," Margaret finally said, the words feeling strange yet relieving. "I'll start thinking about it." The next day, Margaret made a decision. She would reach out to Dr. Thomas and some of the colleagues he had introduced her to and see if they could take on some of the administrative tasks for the program. They had already shown interest in her work, and maybe now was the time to delegate some of the workload. When Margaret called Dr. Thomas to discuss the idea, he was immediately supportive. "Of course, Margaret. You've been doing incredible work. It's clear that the program is making a difference, and we'd love to help. We can take over some of the logistics, planning, and maybe even lead a few seminars on nutrition or mental well-being. You've earned a break." Margaret felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She had been so focused on making sure everything ran smoothly that she hadn't realized how much of a burden she was carrying. Dr. Thomas's offer felt like the lifeline she needed. "I really appreciate this, Dr. Thomas. I don't know what I would have done without your support," Margaret said, her voice filled with gratitude. "You don't have to thank me, Margaret. You've done all the hard work. Now let's build on it together." With that, Margaret officially began sharing the responsibilities of the program. Dr. Thomas took on the logistics, organizing venues and scheduling speakers. A few of his colleagues began conducting the nutrition seminars, while Margaret focused on the emotional well-being aspects of the program, things like mindfulness, stress reduction, and the importance of mental health in the aging process. As the program expanded and gained momentum, the ripple effect was undeniable. More and more seniors began to sign up. Word of mouth spread, and soon, Margaret's initiative wasn't just a small, community-based program, it was becoming something larger, something that people all over the city were beginning to take notice of. Margaret found herself invited to speak at local health fairs, conferences, and even on a few local radio stations. Each time she spoke, she shared the core message of her program: small changes lead to big results. But more than that, she shared her story, how she had turned her life around by making simple, sustainable choices, and how she was now helping others do the same. One of the biggest moments came when Margaret was invited to speak at a citywide wellness event. The event would bring together doctors, nutritionists, fitness experts, and community leaders, and Margaret was asked to present on the importance of mental health and wellness for seniors. It was a big opportunity, and one that Margaret knew she couldn't pass up. The event took place in a large auditorium, filled with a sea of professionals and community members. Margaret stood backstage, nerves bubbling in her stomach. The lights were bright, and the crowd seemed vast. She had been in front of crowds before, but this felt different. She wasn't just representing herself, she was representing every senior who had ever felt overlooked, every person who had struggled with the challenges of aging, and every individual who needed hope. When her name was called, Margaret walked to the stage, her hands slightly trembling but her heart steady. She took a deep breath and began to speak. "I'm here today to talk about wellness. Not just physical wellness, but emotional and mental wellness, too. We often think of aging as a time when our bodies and minds deteriorate. We think of it as a downhill slope. But it doesn't have to be that way. Aging can be a time of renewal, of transformation, and of growth. It all starts with taking small steps." She paused, looking out at the audience. "I've seen it happen. I've seen seniors who were once reluctant to change, who thought it was too late for them, start living with purpose and energy. And I've seen the ripple effect, how one small decision to make a change can impact not only your life, but the lives of everyone around you." Margaret continued, sharing her journey and the lessons she had learned. She spoke of the importance of self-compassion, the value of mindfulness, and how a supportive community could make all the difference. By the time she finished, Margaret was met with applause. As she stepped off the stage, she felt a sense of fulfillment unlike any she had experienced before. This was her moment, not just as a speaker or a program creator, but as someone who had fought to change the narrative around aging, and who was now seeing that change ripple out into the world. As she walked out of the auditorium, Margaret received congratulations from several attendees, but it was one conversation in particular that stood out to her. A woman in her 60s, with kind eyes and a genuine smile, approached her. "I just wanted to say thank you," the woman said. "I've been following your program for a while now, and it's changed my life. I started walking every morning, and I can already feel the difference. It's never too late to start, is it?" Margaret smiled, feeling the weight of the woman's words sink deep into her heart. "No, it's never too late. Thank you for being part of this journey with me." As the woman walked away, Margaret felt a sense of peace wash over her. She had started something small, and it had grown into something far bigger than she had ever imagined. The ripple effect was real. And it was only just beginning. Margaret's program had gained incredible momentum over the past several months. She had forged new relationships with medical professionals, local organizations, and, most importantly, the seniors she was helping. But despite the success and growing recognition, something lingered in the back of her mind. Was she truly addressing the root causes of the challenges seniors face in aging, or was she just scratching the surface? One quiet evening, Margaret sat at her kitchen table, reviewing the feedback from her latest seminar. She'd just completed a session focused on nutrition for seniors, emphasizing the importance of balance, portion control, and the benefits of eating a variety of foods. She had felt good about the event, but as she read through the responses, a troubling thought began to form in her mind. "This is great, but I'm still not seeing significant changes in many of the attendees. They're attending, yes, but are they really engaging? Are they committed to making these changes for the long term?" Margaret knew that many of the seniors were struggling not just with physical challenges, but with emotional and psychological hurdles. The mental burden of aging, of loss, loneliness, fear of the future, was something she hadn't fully addressed in her program yet. She put down the papers and looked out the window at the quiet street outside. The wind rustled through the trees, and she felt a sense of stillness settle over her. It wasn't just the physical health of the seniors that mattered, it was their emotional and mental well-being that she needed to focus on too. If she could help them address their fears, their doubts, and their anxieties, then perhaps the physical changes would follow more naturally. Margaret reached for her phone and called Dr. Thomas. "Hey, Dr. Thomas, I've been thinking. We've been doing great work with the physical health aspects of aging, nutrition, exercise, and all that, but I think there's a piece we're missing. A lot of the seniors I'm working with are struggling with their emotions, loneliness, fear of losing independence, depression. These things are just as big a barrier to health as anything else. What if we start integrating mental health strategies into the program? Dr. Thomas paused for a moment before responding. Margaret, that's a fantastic idea. Emotional well-being is often overlooked in wellness programs, but it's so important. Mental health is just as vital to aging gracefully as physical health. We can incorporate mindfulness techniques, cognitive behavioral strategies, and even offer counseling options. I think that could make a huge difference. Margaret felt a spark of hope. This was the direction she had been looking for. Exactly. I've been seeing firsthand how depression and isolation are affecting these seniors. If we could integrate more resources for mental health and emotional support, maybe we could truly make a lasting impact. That's the kind of holistic approach we need, Dr. Thomas agreed. Let's start by bringing in some experts, therapists, counselors, or maybe even a support group. We can work on destigmatizing mental health issues for seniors and give them the tools they need to cope with the emotional challenges of aging. The next day, Margaret began reaching out to local mental health professionals to discuss how they could collaborate. She also looked into resources for group therapy and peer support networks. It felt like a natural extension of what she had already been doing, but it also felt like a deeper, more meaningful way to connect with the seniors. The following week, Margaret introduced the new element to her wellness program. She stood before a new group of seniors in the community center, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. This was uncharted territory, mental health wasn't something she had fully tackled yet, and she wasn't sure how it would be received. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice warm but steady. "Today, we're going to try something a little different. We've talked a lot about physical health, nutrition, exercise, and all those good things, but today, I want to talk about something just as important, mental health. As we get older, we often face a lot of emotional challenges. Loneliness, fear of losing independence, depression, these are real issues that affect our health. And just like we take care of our bodies, we need to take care of our minds." The room was quiet as the seniors absorbed her words. Some nodded in agreement, while others looked down, perhaps uncomfortable with the topic. Margaret could feel the tension but pressed on. "I know that talking about emotions can be difficult. But it's okay to feel anxious or scared. We're going to spend some time today exploring how we can manage those feelings and build mental resilience. I've invited a special guest to help us with this. Please welcome Dr. Linda Matthews, a psychologist who specializes in working with older adults." Dr. Matthews, a middle-aged woman with a calm demeanor, stepped forward and began speaking about the importance of acknowledging emotions rather than suppressing them. She introduced some basic mindfulness exercises and breathing techniques, explaining how they could help manage stress and anxiety. The group was hesitant at first, but as Dr. Matthews guided them through the exercises, Margaret could see some of the seniors beginning to relax. Their shoulders softened, their expressions grew more peaceful. Margaret's heart swelled with pride. This was the missing piece. This was the approach that would truly help her seniors. She wasn't just giving them tools for physical well-being, she was equipping them to face the emotional challenges that came with aging. Over the following weeks, the integration of mental health support into the wellness program became a game-changer. The seniors began opening up more, sharing their struggles with isolation and loss. Some even admitted they hadn't felt truly connected in years. The group sessions became a safe space for them to talk about their fears and support one another. It was as if a weight had been lifted, and they felt more empowered to take care of themselves, emotionally and physically. Margaret also noticed a shift in the program's dynamics. The seniors who had been resistant to change, those who had only attended the physical health seminars, were now starting to embrace the emotional wellness workshops. They realized that physical health and emotional well-being were two sides of the same coin. They couldn't thrive without addressing both. One afternoon, as Margaret was preparing for another seminar, she received an unexpected letter in the mail. It was from one of the seniors who had been attending the program since the beginning. Dear Margaret, I wanted to take a moment to thank you. When I first started attending your seminars, I was skeptical. I thought it was just another program that would fizzle out. But something changed. The changes I've made to my diet and exercise routines have helped me feel physically stronger, but it's the emotional work we've been doing that has really transformed me. I've learned to let go of my fears, to embrace my aging process, and most importantly, I've learned to be kind to myself. Thank you for showing me that I don't have to face this journey alone. With gratitude. Irene. Margaret read the letter slowly, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. This was what it was all about. This was the impact she had been hoping for all along. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? It had been nearly a year since Margaret had launched her wellness program for seniors, and the growth she had witnessed was nothing short of remarkable. She'd gone from hosting small, intimate seminars to leading a full-fledged movement that reached far beyond the local community. More seniors were getting involved, and many had begun to see real improvements in their health, both physical and emotional. Margaret couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in what she had created, but there was still one challenge that she hadn't fully faced, herself. As the program grew, so did the pressure. Margaret was constantly busy, whether she was organizing the seminars, coordinating with speakers and experts, or managing the feedback and logistical details. But what really weighed on her was the never-ending fear of burnout. She had always been the type to pour herself into her work, to give everything she had to the cause, but lately, it felt like the more she gave, the less energy she had to give back to herself. One afternoon, while reviewing emails and preparing for an upcoming event, Margaret received another call from Emma. "Hey, Mom. How's everything going?" Emma's voice was light, but Margaret could sense the concern underneath. Margaret hesitated for a moment. She hadn't really talked to Emma about how tired she was. Emma knew about the program's success, of course, but she hadn't realized the toll it was taking on her mother. "I'm doing well, but honestly, I think I'm running on fumes at this point," Margaret admitted. "The program is growing, and that's amazing, but it's also a lot. I'm starting to feel like I'm spread too thin." Emma's tone shifted immediately. "Mom, you need to take care of yourself. You can't help others if you're not taking care of your own health. Have you considered taking a break or maybe scaling back a bit?" Margaret sighed. I know, but it's hard. I feel like I'm letting everyone down if I step back, even for a little while." "You're not letting anyone down, Mom," Emma said gently. "You've built something amazing, and it's helping so many people. But that doesn't mean you have to sacrifice your own well-being. We all want you to be happy and healthy too." Margaret thought about Emma's words as she hung up the phone. It wasn't the first time she'd heard such advice, but it was the first time it felt like a wake-up call. She realized Emma was right. She had been so focused on helping others that she had neglected to help herself. That evening, Margaret made a decision. She would take a step back and give herself the time and space she needed to recharge. She reached out to Dr. Thomas to discuss the possibility of temporarily delegating some of her responsibilities. He was incredibly understanding and assured her that the program could continue to run smoothly with the right support. The next day, Margaret set up a meeting with her team and explained her plans. She didn't want to let anyone down, but she needed to prioritize her health, both for her sake and for the program's future. Dr. Thomas and the others agreed to step in and take over the bulk of the tasks while Margaret focused on her own self-care. It was hard for Margaret to let go of control at first. She'd always been the one who made every decision, who ensured that everything was just right. But as the days went by, she began to feel a weight lift off her shoulders. For the first time in months, she could take a deep breath without feeling like there was always something else to do. Margaret spent the following weeks focusing on rest, reflection, and recharging. She took walks through the park, enjoyed quiet evenings at home, and even visited her sister, who lived a few hours away, for a weekend getaway. It was the break she had been needing for so long, and as time went on, Margaret felt herself slowly regaining the energy she had lost. During one of her walks in the park, she reflected on how far she had come. The seniors she had helped, the positive changes they had made in their lives, it was all worth it. But Margaret also realized that she had learned an important lesson during this period of rest. To be truly effective, she needed to find balance. She couldn't pour from an empty cup. And while it was important to care for others, she had to remember to care for herself, too. When Margaret returned to her work, she did so with a new mindset. She didn't rush back into everything at once. Instead, she carefully re-evaluated her role in the program and how she could continue to make an impact without compromising her health. She started setting clearer boundaries, delegating tasks more efficiently, and ensuring that she took regular breaks to avoid burnout. It wasn't always easy, but Margaret had learned that balance wasn't about perfection, it was about finding a sustainable way to give both to others and to herself. One day, after returning from a meeting with her team, Margaret received a phone call that would change everything. It was from the office of a well-known national organization that focused on senior health and wellness. They had been following Margaret's work and were interested in partnering with her program. They wanted to expand her reach and bring the principles she had developed to a wider audience. Margaret could hardly believe it. This was the opportunity she had been dreaming of. She knew this partnership could take her program to new heights, allowing her to help even more people. But she also knew it would require a significant amount of time, effort, and resources. As she sat down to discuss the opportunity with Dr. Thomas and her team, Margaret realized that she was standing at a crossroads. This partnership could open up incredible doors, but it also required a major commitment. She would need to decide if she was ready to take on this next challenge, or if she needed to continue focusing on what she already had. "I've been thinking," Margaret said, her voice thoughtful. "This partnership could really elevate the program. But it's going to mean even more work, more travel, more time away. I need to make sure I'm ready for this next step. I don't want to lose sight of what really matters, my health and the quality of care I'm offering." Dr. Thomas nodded. "That's a wise approach. Whatever you decide, we're here to support you. This program has already grown because of your dedication, but you need to take care of yourself first." Margaret took a deep breath. She didn't have all the answers yet, but one thing was clear, the road ahead would require careful consideration. She had built something meaningful, and now she needed to decide how to move forward in a way that would allow her to continue helping others without losing herself in the process. The phone call from the national organization had left Margaret in a state of contemplation. On one hand, the opportunity to expand her program was a dream come true. But on the other, she knew she couldn't simply rush into it without considering the impact it would have on her health, her team, and the seniors she had spent so much time nurturing. Margaret spent the next few days in a quiet, reflective state. She made lists of pros and cons, weighing the benefits of the partnership against the risks. Her team was fully capable of taking on more responsibilities, but the emotional toll of the program, especially when it came to connecting with the seniors, was something that no one else could replicate in quite the same way. She couldn't afford to lose the personal touch that had made her program so successful. Sitting at her kitchen table one morning, a cup of tea in hand, Margaret picked up her phone and called Emma again. "Mom, how's it going?" Emma's voice was cheerful, but Margaret could tell she was sensing the underlying tension. "I got that call," Margaret began, her tone thoughtful. "The one I mentioned from the national organization. They want to partner with me. It's a big opportunity, but I'm just not sure. It could be amazing, but it would also mean a lot more responsibility, more travel, and more stress." There was a pause on the other end. Margaret could hear Emma thinking. "Mom, I know this is huge," Emma finally said. "But you've been doing this for a long time. You've built something incredible, and you've helped so many people. But you've also learned, I think, that you need to take care of yourself. So, what do you want? Margaret closed her eyes for a moment, taking in Emma's words. It was a simple question, but one that cut to the heart of everything. What did she want? Was this partnership something she truly desired, or was she simply chasing after success for the sake of it? I think I want to continue growing the program, Margaret said slowly, but I want to do it in a way that feels right. I don't want to lose sight of why I started all of this in the first place, to truly make a difference in the lives of the seniors. And if that means scaling things back or taking a slower approach, I think that might be what's best. Margaret spent the next week in meetings with Dr. Thomas and her team. Together, they devised a strategy that would allow them to expand the program gradually, without overwhelming Margaret or anyone else involved. The national partnership would be a part of the plan, but it wouldn't dominate the mission. Instead, it would enhance the work that had already been done, allowing for growth in a sustainable way. The first step was to identify new team members who could take on key roles. Margaret reached out to a trusted colleague who had been in the senior wellness field for years and had a reputation for being reliable and compassionate. After some discussions, they agreed that this colleague would help manage the expanding outreach, while Dr. Thomas would continue overseeing the medical aspects of the program. Margaret would remain involved but in a more strategic, overseeing capacity, ensuring the core of the program stayed true to its mission. As the new team took shape, Margaret found herself feeling more at ease. She was no longer shouldering the weight of everything herself. The responsibility had been divided, allowing her to focus on the aspects of the program that she truly enjoyed, working directly with the seniors, helping them navigate their personal journeys, and staying connected to the heart of the initiative. Margaret's days became a balance of meetings and outreach, but also time for reflection and connection. She spent more time with her seniors, hearing their stories, offering encouragement, and sometimes simply listening. She wasn't constantly rushing from one task to the next. Instead, she was present in every interaction, offering a level of care that came from the heart. One afternoon, Margaret received a message from Irene, the senior who had written her the heartfelt letter months ago. Dear Margaret, I wanted to let you know how much your program has changed my life. When I first started, I was hesitant, unsure if I could make any real changes. But through your guidance, I've not only improved my physical health but also my mental well-being. I've become more confident, more connected, and less afraid of what the future holds. Thank you for showing me that it's never too late to start living better. With all my gratitude. Irene. Reading Irene's message, Margaret felt a tear slip down her cheek. This was why she had done it all. She was making a difference, slowly, steadily, and profoundly. Her work wasn't about rushing to meet the demands of an ever-expanding program, it was about creating lasting change, one person at a time. Weeks turned into months, and the balance that Margaret had worked so hard to establish began to pay off. The national partnership, while still in its early stages, had brought new resources and support to the program. The outreach expanded, bringing in more participants, more volunteers, and more experts. But through it all, Margaret made sure to maintain the personal touch that had made her program so special. She continued to check in with her seniors, offering personalized advice and encouragement. She held smaller, more intimate sessions that allowed for deeper connections, even as the larger program grew. And, most importantly, she maintained her commitment to her own health. Regular breaks, quiet moments of reflection, and the support of her team helped her stay grounded. One sunny afternoon, as Margaret sat on her porch, sipping her tea and watching the world go by, she received another call from the national organization. They had reviewed the progress of the partnership and were impressed by how well it was going. They wanted to move forward with a nationwide campaign to promote her program. Margaret smiled to herself. The future was bright. But this time, she didn't feel the rush of pressure. She felt a sense of calm. She knew that this next chapter would unfold at its own pace, and that she had the strength and wisdom to handle whatever came her way. Months had passed since the national campaign for Margaret's wellness program had officially launched. What began as a small, local initiative had turned into a movement that was now reaching seniors across the country. The program's message of health, self-care, and empowerment was resonating deeply with people, and the success stories continued to pour in. Yet, as things flourished, Margaret found herself stepping into new, unfamiliar territory. Managing a national initiative was a far cry from the intimate, one-on-one connections she had been used to. The personal touch that had defined the program was starting to feel like a challenge, given the overwhelming scale of the outreach. Margaret was no longer just meeting with a handful of seniors, she was overseeing a team of hundreds, from coaches to health experts, all working together to ensure the program ran smoothly. There were more meetings, more reports, and more decisions to make. Many of them crucial to the continued success of the initiative. She had, in many ways, become a figurehead for something much larger than herself. And although she was still deeply passionate about the program, there were days when the weight of it all felt heavier than she had anticipated. One particular afternoon, Margaret sat at her desk in her home office, reviewing a new proposal for a senior retreat program. She had been working on this idea for months, an immersive weekend where seniors could come together to learn, connect, and rejuvenate. The idea had sparked excitement among her team, and the interest from the community was undeniable. But as she skimmed through the details, she realized something was missing. Her signature, her passion, wasn't in it. The proposal, though well-crafted, felt like another corporate checklist. There was no soul, no heart. She didn't want to create an experience that was purely transactional. She wanted something that would touch people on a deeper level. Margaret rubbed her temples, exhaustion creeping in. She had always been the one to inject that personal touch into every project, every idea. But lately, she had been so focused on scaling up that she hadn't been able to put the same care into her own work. As the weight of the situation settled in, her phone buzzed with a message from Emma. "Hey, Mom, do you want to grab dinner tomorrow? I feel like we need to talk." Margaret smiled at the message. It had been a while since they had had one of their heart-to-heart dinners. Life had been so hectic that their usual bonding time had fallen to the wayside. She quickly typed back, "I'd love to. How about 6:30? The next evening, Margaret and Emma met at their favorite Italian restaurant, a cozy spot in the heart of the city. It was a place that always felt like a retreat, with dim lighting, soft music, and the scent of fresh basil in the air. After ordering their meals, Emma wasted no time getting to the point. "Mom, I've been thinking a lot about everything that's going on with your program. And honestly, I'm worried about you." Margaret leaned back in her chair, taking a slow breath. "I know. I've been feeling it too. The program is growing, and that's a good thing, but I'm starting to lose touch with why I started this in the first place. It's all becoming so big. So corporate." Emma nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. "You've built something amazing, Mom. You've changed so many lives. But it feels like you've gotten so caught up in the logistics and the growth that you've lost the part of you that made it special. The personal connection." Margaret looked down at her plate, feeling the weight of her daughter's words. "You're right," she admitted softly. "I've been so focused on making the program bigger, on reaching more people, that I've forgotten what it was like when I was just helping a few individuals. That connection, that's what made it real." After dinner, as they walked down the street together, Margaret felt lighter. Emma's words had struck a chord, and for the first time in a long while, she began to see the path forward more clearly. The next morning, she woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. She realized that it wasn't just about growing the program for the sake of growth. It was about maintaining the heart of the program, the heart of the mission. She didn't have to abandon the national reach that had been so successful, but she needed to reconnect with what mattered most, the people. Margaret decided to take a step back from the overwhelming demands of overseeing everything at once. She reached out to Dr. Thomas, her team, and the new partners, and began restructuring how the program operated. It would continue to grow, but in a way that maintained the core values that had made it successful from the start. One of her first decisions was to implement smaller, more intimate events where she could directly engage with the seniors once again. She'd create opportunities for them to share their stories, their challenges, and their victories, just like she had done in the beginning. She would also continue to provide the personal touch that had always defined her work. But perhaps the most significant change she made was to establish a mentorship program, where experienced seniors could mentor newcomers. This would allow for deeper, more personal connections between participants, fostering a sense of community and support that went beyond the workshops and events. It would create a ripple effect, one where seniors not only benefited from the program but also became ambassadors for it. A few weeks later, Margaret attended the first mentorship meeting. It was a small gathering in a community center, with a mix of familiar faces and newcomers. As Margaret walked into the room, she was struck by how much she had missed this, seeing the smiles, hearing the laughter, and listening to the conversations that were rich with wisdom and experience. Margaret. Irene, one of her longtime participants, greeted her with open arms. "It's so good to see you again." Margaret returned the hug, feeling the warmth of the room envelop her. It was moments like this that reminded her why she had started all of this, to create a community where people could feel seen, heard, and supported. She took her seat and listened as the mentorship pairs shared their experiences. Each story was a testament to the power of connection, of offering guidance, and of learning from each other. As the meeting went on, Margaret realized that this was the kind of impact she had always wanted to create, a ripple effect of positivity, kindness, and empowerment. As she left the community center that day, Margaret felt a profound sense of peace. She knew that the road ahead was still filled with challenges, but now, she was ready to face them with a renewed sense of purpose. She didn't need to sacrifice the heart of her program to grow it. In fact, by staying true to that heart, she could create a legacy that would continue to ripple out for years to come. It had been a few months since Margaret had redefined her role in the program. With the mentorship initiative successfully taking root, her sense of balance had returned. The excitement of watching the seniors connect with each other, of witnessing the power of their stories, had reminded her why she started this work in the first place. The program had grown in size, but it felt more personal now, more rooted in the values she cherished. Yet, just as things were starting to feel settled, an unexpected challenge appeared. It was late one evening when Margaret received an email that made her heart skip a beat. The subject line read, "Urgent, funding changes for national program." She opened the message to find a notification from one of the main funding organizations, informing her that, due to unforeseen budget cuts, they would be reducing their financial support for the program by nearly 30%. Margaret's stomach tightened as she read the email again. The numbers didn't lie. Without this funding, many of the planned initiatives, including outreach events, senior retreats, and even the mentorship program, would be at risk. She had already done everything she could to keep costs low, but this was a blow she hadn't expected. With a sigh, Margaret set the phone down beside her and leaned back in her chair. She thought about all the progress they had made, the connections, the relationships, the success stories. And now, it could all come crashing down. She spent the next hour going over the numbers in her head, trying to devise a solution. She considered applying for other grants, but with the competitive landscape and the timing, that didn't seem like a quick fix. Could she lean on the other partners in the program? Maybe, but they were already stretched thin. She couldn't expect them to pick up the slack without jeopardizing the quality of the work they were already doing. Her mind swirled as she tried to come up with an answer. After a while, she realized that there was no easy solution. This was a turning point. It wasn't just about numbers or programs anymore. It was about the mission, the people. And Margaret couldn't afford to lose sight of that. The next morning, Margaret met with Dr. Thomas and the leadership team to discuss the email. As they sat around the table, her frustration was evident, but so was her resolve. "We've worked too hard to let this setback destroy everything we've built," Margaret said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. We have to find a way to keep the program going, even if it means making some tough choices. Dr. Thomas nodded, looking over the email with a thoughtful expression. We may need to make cuts, yes. But maybe it's not just about cutting costs, it's about finding creative solutions to sustain what's most important. What's the heart of this program? Margaret thought for a moment. The heart of this program is the seniors. It's the individual connections, the sense of community. It's the mentorship and the health support. Those things, those are irreplaceable. We can't afford to lose them. There was a long pause as the team processed the gravity of the situation. Finally, Dr. Thomas spoke up again. What if we reallocate resources, reframe our goals for the next quarter, and focus on smaller, high-impact activities instead of broad outreach? We could also reach out to local businesses for support. A sponsorship model might be a way to offset some of the funding loss. Margaret nodded slowly, feeling a glimmer of hope. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. Over the next few weeks, the team worked tirelessly to implement a new plan. They scaled back some of the national outreach and focused on deepening their impact in local communities. Instead of large retreats, they organized smaller, more intimate gatherings where seniors could connect, share, and learn in a way that felt personal and meaningful. They reached out to local businesses and asked for sponsorships, offering them exposure through the program's growing social media presence. The support was humbling. Several businesses, including health stores, wellness spas, and even local fitness centers, stepped forward to contribute, offering resources, space, and funding. Margaret had always believed in the power of community, but seeing it unfold in real time was an inspiring experience. The local businesses were not just providing financial support, they were also becoming part of the community's fabric. The ripple effect of the program was growing, as more people were invested in its success. Despite the mounting pressure, Margaret remained focused on the seniors. Every day, she took time to connect with her participants, speaking to them on the phone or in small group meetings. She was reminded, time and again, that the impact of the program wasn't just about the money. It was about the people, the relationships she had built, the encouragement they offered each other, and the hope they shared. One afternoon, Margaret sat down with Irene, who had now become one of the program's most dedicated mentors. Irene had been with the program for over a year, and her transformation was nothing short of remarkable. Not only had she improved her health, but her confidence had soared, and she had become an integral part of the community. I can't tell you how much this program has changed my life, Margaret, Irene said, her eyes filled with gratitude. When I first joined, I was just looking for a way to feel better. But now I feel like I have a purpose. I'm able to give back. I'm able to share what I've learned with others. Margaret smiled softly, her heart full. You're the reason this program exists, Irene. It's people like you who make it all worthwhile. You're the heart of this movement. Irene's eyes glistened with emotion. Well, you're the one who made it happen. And I'm not the only one. We're all in this together. As the weeks went by, the team continued to adjust their approach, relying on the support of the local community and staying true to their mission. Margaret knew the road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in a long while, she felt confident. She had weathered the storm. The funding cuts had been a difficult setback, but they had also been a wake-up call. The true strength of the program wasn't in the funding, it was in the people, in the stories, and in the connections that had been made along the way. As Margaret walked out of her office one evening, feeling the cool air of the approaching winter, she couldn't help but reflect on everything she had learned. The program would continue to grow, but it would do so in a way that honored its roots. And that was what mattered most. The holidays were approaching, and the air was thick with the promise of change. Margaret stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her coat before stepping out for the evening. The world outside her window had turned to a blanket of crisp white snow, and the festive lights twinkled in the distance, marking the season's arrival. She was headed to a community dinner organized by the program, an event meant to bring everyone together to celebrate the progress they had made. But as Margaret made her way to the venue, her mind was heavy. Although the program had found its balance again after the funding setbacks, there was still the lingering question of sustainability. The sponsorship model was helping, but it wasn't a long-term solution. The program was still growing, still needed more support, and Margaret had yet to come up with a sustainable strategy that would secure its future. As she entered the venue, the buzz of conversation and laughter immediately lifted her spirits. The room was filled with seniors, volunteers, and team members, all gathering to celebrate a year's worth of accomplishments. The tables were lined with warm food, decorated with holiday cheer, and the atmosphere was warm, much like a family reunion. Margaret had no idea just how much this evening would remind her of the impact her work was having. The dinner began with a few speeches, where Margaret addressed the crowd, thanking everyone for their dedication and passion. It was a moment for the seniors to reflect on their shared experiences and for Margaret to acknowledge the resilience of the community she had helped foster. Afterward, the floor was open for seniors to share their stories. One by one, they stood and spoke about how the program had changed their lives. There was James, who had once felt invisible in a world that seemed to prioritize youth, but now, he felt empowered and active in his community. And there was Sarah, a widow who had come to the program alone but had since found new friendships that helped her heal from the loneliness she had been carrying for years. Margaret's heart swelled with pride as she listened to each person. She could feel the difference the program had made in their lives, and it reminded her of the power of connection, the very thing she had set out to nurture when this all began. But then, just as she was feeling confident about the evening, a voice rang out from across the room. "Margaret! Over here!" It was Emma, waving excitedly, her warm smile lighting up the room. Emma had been juggling work and school, but she had made it a priority to attend the dinner and support her mother's program. Margaret made her way over to her daughter, who was sitting with a group of seniors. Emma introduced her to the small circle of people, and they immediately began talking about the changes they had experienced since joining the program. Margaret felt herself drawn into the conversation, connecting with each person, sharing laughs, and enjoying the mutual admiration that had blossomed from the work they had done together. As the night wore on, one of the seniors, Mary, stood up to make an impromptu speech. She was an older woman, sharp-minded and kind-hearted, with a twinkle in her eye. "I may not have much left in terms of years," Mary began, her voice steady, "but what I've gained in this program has been more than I could have ever hoped for. It's not just about health, it's about finding purpose again. You've given us that, Margaret." The room fell silent, and Margaret felt her throat tighten. For a moment, she was speechless. She had never considered herself a hero. She was just a person who had found a way to make a difference. But hearing Mary's words made her realize how much of an impact she had truly had on the lives around her. Margaret wiped away a stray tear. "Thank you, Mary. But it's not just me, it's all of us. We're a community. And it's the strength of that community that has made all the difference." The room erupted in applause, and Margaret's heart swelled. She felt truly seen, truly understood. In that moment, all the sacrifices, the sleepless nights, and the challenges felt worth it. The program had become something bigger than herself, something that had touched the lives of so many. It was a living, breathing testament to resilience. After the dinner, as Margaret and Emma walked home together, Emma noticed the contemplative look on her mother's face. "Mom," Emma said gently, "you're thinking about next steps, aren't you?" Margaret nodded, her breath visible in the chilly air. "I am. The program is in a good place right now, but I can't shake the feeling that we need something more, something that can ensure this continues long after we're gone." Emma smiled knowingly. "Maybe it's time to think about a legacy fund. Something that could help ensure the program's longevity, even if it's not directly tied to our fundraising efforts." Margaret paused, considering the idea. "A legacy fund," she mused. "That's not a bad idea. It could help sustain the program for years to come, ensuring it reaches more seniors, more communities, for generations. I think we could make it work. Over the next few weeks, Margaret and Emma worked together to draft a proposal for the Legacy Fund. The idea was to create an endowment that would continue to support the program, ensuring that it remained accessible to seniors regardless of funding cuts or external challenges. They reached out to major donors, organizations, and partners to secure seed funding, and soon, they began to see the potential of this vision unfolding. The response was overwhelming. People who had benefited from the program were eager to contribute to its future, and those who believed in its mission were excited to get involved. The community, once again, came together, ready to support something bigger than themselves. Months later, the program officially launched its first-ever Legacy Fund, and the response was everything Margaret had hoped for. The initial contributions were modest, but the momentum grew as more individuals joined the effort. The sense of security the fund provided allowed Margaret and her team to focus on expanding their outreach, creating new opportunities for seniors to connect, and developing innovative wellness programs. And as the program's reach continued to expand, Margaret knew that the legacy she was building was not just for herself, it was for all the seniors whose lives had been touched by this work. The legacy was theirs as much as it was hers. That winter, as Margaret stood outside and watched the snow gently fall, she felt a sense of peace. The program had endured. It had grown. And it had a future. In that moment, she understood that this wasn't just a program. It was a movement that would continue to thrive, evolve, and inspire. And in a world that often overlooked the elderly, Margaret had helped to create something that would stand the test of time. A legacy of resilience. As spring approached, Margaret found herself looking at the program through a new lens. The Legacy Fund had begun to take shape, and the momentum behind it was undeniable. What once seemed like an insurmountable obstacle, the uncertainty of funding, had transformed into a strong foundation that would carry the program forward for years to come. The challenges had not disappeared, but they had become manageable. Now, Margaret's mind was focused on the next step, expansion. In her heart, she knew the program had the potential to help so many more people, to reach out beyond their current scope. But there was something that still troubled her, the notion of maintaining the personal touch. The program had thrived because it had always been about connection, about relationships that were fostered through shared experiences. And as they expanded, there was a genuine concern that the core essence of what they had built could get lost. Margaret sat down with her leadership team to discuss this next phase. They needed to be careful. They couldn't lose the heart of what they were doing as they reached more communities. "I've been thinking," Margaret started, her voice thoughtful, "about how we scale this program without losing what makes it so special. We've always prided ourselves on personal relationships. It's the key to everything we've accomplished so far. How do we maintain that, even as we bring in more people?" Dr. Thomas leaned back in his chair, his brow furrowed in concentration. "That's a valid concern. The growth could dilute the experience if we're not careful. Maybe we can implement more localized leadership within new areas, local coordinators who share our values and can oversee the connections we've cultivated. This way, we have more hands on deck, but still a personal touch." Margaret nodded. The idea of expanding leadership at the local level made sense. It would allow them to maintain the integrity of the program while growing it. "That could work," she said. "But we also need to make sure that these new coordinators understand what we stand for. They'll need to be aligned with our vision. Maybe a training program that helps reinforce our mission and the core principles of what we do." "I agree," said Sarah, one of the senior mentors. "We could also ask for feedback from the seniors in these new locations, ensure they're truly benefiting from the program the way we intend. The more input we have from them, the better we can fine-tune our approach." Margaret smiled at the suggestion. She had always valued the feedback of the seniors, they were the heart of the program. Listening to their experiences would help them ensure they were meeting their needs. In the months that followed, the program began to expand. New communities joined the initiative, and local coordinators were brought on to oversee the day-to-day operations. The mentors, too, had a hand in welcoming the new seniors, offering guidance and support to help them integrate into the group. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Seniors in new locations quickly embraced the program, and soon, the ripple effect Margaret had hoped for began to spread. The new participants felt empowered, knowing that they were part of something bigger than themselves. They found purpose and connection, just like the seniors who had come before them. One evening, as Margaret reviewed the program's growth, she received a phone call that would alter the course of their journey. "Margaret, I have something incredible to share," Emma said, her voice filled with excitement. "A major healthcare organization has reached out to us. They've been watching the program's success, and they want to partner with us. They're interested in providing additional funding, but they also want to collaborate on a new initiative. Something that could have a massive impact." Margaret's pulse quickened. A partnership? With a healthcare organization? That's huge. What do they have in mind? They want to create a new wellness initiative, specifically tailored to seniors. They're impressed with how we've integrated physical, mental, and emotional health into our programming, and they see an opportunity to take it further. They're offering both financial support and resources to help expand the program. Margaret's mind raced with possibilities. This could be the breakthrough they had been waiting for, the kind of partnership that could elevate the program to new heights. But she also knew that with great opportunity came great responsibility. They couldn't afford to compromise their values, even with this new partnership on the horizon. "I need to meet with them. We'll discuss what they envision, but I want to make sure this aligns with our mission. We can't just take the money and run. It has to be the right fit." Over the next few weeks, Margaret and Emma met with the healthcare organization's leadership team. The discussions were fruitful, and it became clear that their values aligned. The organization was committed to promoting senior wellness and saw the program as an excellent model for expansion. They were particularly interested in developing a holistic wellness initiative, combining fitness programs, mental health support, and nutrition education to offer a comprehensive solution for aging adults. Margaret was cautiously optimistic. The resources they would provide could help the program reach even more seniors, while also enhancing the quality of what they already offered. However, she made it clear that maintaining the personal connections and the sense of community would be paramount. The partnership was finalized, and it quickly became apparent that this collaboration would have a profound effect. New wellness initiatives were developed, and funding from the healthcare organization allowed the program to hire additional staff and expand its reach. A few months later, Margaret stood at the front of a large community center, addressing a room full of new seniors who had joined the program. They were listening intently as she spoke about the changes that were taking place, about how the program would continue to grow, and how they would be part of something much bigger than themselves. "We are building a movement," Margaret said, her voice filled with passion. "This program is not just about fitness or health. It's about creating a community where we support one another, where each of you has a role to play, and where we lift each other up." The room was silent as the seniors absorbed her words. Then, one by one, they began to speak, sharing their excitement and their gratitude. It was clear, Margaret's vision had been realized. This program had become a lifeline for so many, and now, it was reaching further than ever before. As Margaret watched the seniors interact, she thought about how far they had come. The ripple effect that had started with a small group of seniors in her community had turned into something far greater. The partnerships, the growth, the impact, it was all a testament to the power of resilience and connection. She had once feared that expanding the program would diminish its impact. But in the end, it had done the opposite. The program had grown stronger, more interconnected, and more meaningful than she could have ever imagined. Margaret felt a deep sense of pride, knowing that this movement would continue to evolve, touching lives and leaving a lasting legacy. She had built something that would stand the test of time, and that was worth every challenge, every sacrifice. As summer arrived, the program was flourishing in ways that Margaret had never dreamed possible. The legacy fund had grown significantly, and the partnership with the healthcare organization was helping to create an innovative new wellness initiative that was already beginning to show promising results. The program was reaching more seniors, creating more connections, and transforming more lives than ever before. Yet, even amidst the excitement, Margaret still found herself thinking about the essence of what had made the program so successful in the first place. It wasn't the funding, the partnerships, or even the programs themselves. It was the community, the bond that had formed between the seniors, the volunteers, the mentors, and everyone who had become part of this journey. She walked into the main meeting room one morning, where a group of new seniors was gathered. The space was filled with energy as the new participants met one another, exchanging stories and sharing experiences. Margaret watched as they engaged with one another, bonding over common interests, struggles, and victories. This was the magic of it all, creating a space where people felt seen, heard, and valued. A space where they could share their fears, their dreams, and their hopes for the future, knowing that they weren't alone. Margaret approached one of the seniors, a woman named Ruth, who had been with the program for a few months now. Ruth was in her early 70s, a former teacher with a sharp wit and a kind heart. She had initially been hesitant about joining, unsure of whether a program like this would be worth her time. But now, Ruth was one of the program's biggest advocates. "Ruth," Margaret said, "I see you're enjoying the group today. How's everything going?" Ruth looked up and smiled. "Oh, Margaret, it's more than just enjoying, it's life-changing. I'm meeting new people, I'm staying active, and most importantly, I'm not sitting alone at home anymore. I have purpose now." Margaret felt a wave of emotion. Ruth's words were a perfect reminder of why she had started this program in the first place. It wasn't about creating a successful business model or expanding for the sake of growth. It was about giving people like Ruth the opportunity to find joy, connection, and fulfillment. "That's exactly what we're trying to do," Margaret said, her voice soft but sincere. "You're part of something bigger now, something that's going to help so many more people just like you." Ruth's smile deepened. "And I'm proud to be part of it. I'm telling everyone I know about this. It's been a gift." The community was beginning to take on a life of its own. Seniors, once isolated and disconnected, were now interacting with one another in meaningful ways. They were taking classes together, attending social events, and volunteering to help others. Margaret had envisioned the program as a means of combating loneliness and isolation, but she hadn't fully anticipated how the seniors would rise to the occasion themselves, creating a ripple effect of connection that would go far beyond her original plan. One of the most significant developments came from the seniors themselves. A group of them had started meeting weekly to discuss ideas for new initiatives that would benefit their peers. They wanted to create an intergenerational mentoring program, where younger people could connect with seniors, learning from their life experiences while offering their own skills and energy in return. Margaret had always believed in the power of collaboration and community, but this was something different, something deeper. The seniors weren't just beneficiaries of the program, they were becoming active participants, shaping its future. It was a beautiful testament to how powerful a sense of belonging could be. Later that week, Margaret received an unexpected visit from one of her longtime mentors, Dr. Grace Wilson. Dr. Wilson had been with the program since its early days and had watched Margaret grow from a passionate but uncertain leader to a confident, determined force. She was an elderly physician who had retired years ago but still wanted to contribute to her community. "Margaret, it's good to see you," Dr. Wilson said with a warm smile as she settled into the chair across from Margaret in her office. "How's everything going with the program?" "It's going great, actually," Margaret replied, her eyes lighting up. "I feel like we've reached a tipping point. We're growing, and the Legacy Fund is helping more than I could have imagined. And now, the community is stepping up. They're starting their own initiatives, like the Intergenerational Mentoring Program." Dr. Wilson nodded, clearly impressed. "That's wonderful. You know, when I first joined this program, I saw its potential, but I never imagined it would take on such a life of its own. I always knew that if people found a way to connect with each other, really connect, there would be no stopping them. Margaret smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for Dr. Wilson's wisdom. I think you were right. This community, it's not just about the seniors coming together. It's about everyone coming together to create something meaningful. Dr. Wilson leaned in slightly, her eyes twinkling. That's the beauty of it. When you give people the chance to be heard, to share their experiences, they'll not only find strength in each other, they'll find strength in themselves. And that's the kind of change that lasts. Margaret sat back in her chair, considering Dr. Wilson's words. The program had started with a simple mission, to create a space where seniors could find support and purpose. But as it grew, Margaret realized that the program had become something much bigger. It wasn't just a space for seniors to come and go, it was a space for them to flourish, to share their gifts, and to change the world around them. Later that month, Margaret attended one of the program's community meetings. The room was filled with energy as the seniors discussed ideas for new activities, collaborations, and outreach efforts. They had organized themselves into teams, each taking responsibility for different aspects of the program, from organizing social events to developing wellness initiatives. The sense of ownership was palpable. Margaret looked around at the faces of the people who had once been strangers, but now felt like family. They were all working together to build something that would last. It was incredible to see how the program had become a place where people weren't just surviving, they were thriving. That evening, as Margaret sat down to dinner with Emma, her daughter could see the satisfaction in her eyes. "How's it all going, Mom? The program, the partnerships, everything?" Margaret paused for a moment, savoring her food before answering. "It's going better than I could have imagined. The program is stronger than ever, and the community we've built is truly remarkable. I never thought it would turn into this, into something that's so much bigger than myself. I'm proud of what we've done, but I'm even prouder of what everyone in this community is doing now. They're not just participants anymore, they're leaders." Emma smiled, raising her glass. "Here's to community, Mom. To what you've built." Margaret clinked her glass against Emma's, feeling a sense of peace. The road ahead was still filled with challenges, but she knew that as long as they held on to the power of community, they could overcome anything. And as the days turned into months, that sense of unity would be the foundation that carried the program into the future. It wasn't just about helping seniors, it was about building a movement that would change lives for generations to come. As the autumn leaves began to fall, Margaret found herself at a crossroads. The program had expanded beyond her wildest expectations, the community had flourished, and the new initiatives were thriving. But as with any success, the more they grew, the more complex the landscape became. There were more voices to hear, more challenges to address, and more people to connect. Yet, in all the hustle and bustle of managing the program, Margaret had one pressing question on her mind: how could they ensure that the heart of the program, the personal connection, the community, remained intact? One afternoon, after a busy week of meetings and planning, Margaret sat quietly in her office. She watched the sun set over the horizon, the golden light spilling through the window, casting long shadows across the room. It had been a whirlwind few months, and she felt the weight of it all, the decisions, the responsibilities, the hope she had placed in this program. The success was undeniable, but the pressure to sustain it was starting to wear on her. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a moment, and thought about the very beginning. She remembered the first group of seniors who had walked through those doors. The hesitation in their eyes, the uncertainty about what they were about to experience. But something had clicked. They had formed a community, a safe space where they could be themselves without judgment. That was the magic of the program. That was the heart of it. Margaret stood up from her desk and walked to the window. She could see the park outside, where the trees were shedding their leaves. She had a thought: perhaps it was time for a reset. A time to remind everyone, including herself, of why they were doing this in the first place. The next morning, she called a meeting with her leadership team. As the group gathered around the large conference table, Margaret felt a sense of clarity she hadn't experienced in weeks. She knew the challenges ahead, but more importantly, she knew that together, they could solve them. "I've been thinking a lot lately," Margaret began, her voice steady. "About how we keep the essence of what we've built while expanding. We've grown so much, but I want to make sure we don't lose sight of our roots. We started with a simple goal, to create a community where seniors can thrive, connect, and support each other. But as we continue to grow, I want to ensure that the heart of this program stays at the center of everything we do." Dr. Thomas, always the pragmatist, nodded thoughtfully. "You're right, Margaret. We've made tremendous strides, but it's easy for the personal touch to get lost when there's so much to manage. We need to find a way to scale without losing the relationships that make this program so special." Sarah, the program's senior mentor, added, "Maybe it's time we turn back to the basics. Let's have some community-building events, where everyone, newcomers and veterans alike, can connect. Maybe a retreat, or just a series of smaller group gatherings to focus on deepening our connections with one another." Margaret smiled at the idea. A retreat. It felt like exactly what the program needed, an opportunity to slow down, to reconnect, and to remind everyone why they were there. The retreat could be a time to pause, reflect, and recharge, while reinforcing the bonds that had made the program so meaningful. Planning for the retreat began almost immediately. They selected a location in the nearby countryside, a peaceful retreat center surrounded by nature, perfect for the quiet reflection and connection that Margaret envisioned. The goal was clear: to create an environment where everyone could take a step back from the demands of daily life and truly connect with one another. It would be a place to reflect on the journey so far, share stories, and renew their commitment to the mission. The week before the retreat, Margaret sent out personal invitations to all the seniors involved in the program. She wanted to make sure each person knew how important they were to the success of the program and how grateful she was for their dedication. The message was simple but heartfelt: this retreat was for them, a chance to come together and deepen their sense of community. On the day of the retreat, Margaret arrived early to help with the setup. As the seniors began to trickle in, she felt a sense of excitement. This would be a chance to hit the reset button, to remind everyone of the power of connection. The first evening of the retreat began with a welcome dinner, and the air was filled with laughter and chatter. Seniors who had never met before were exchanging stories as if they had known each other for years. Margaret moved around the room, stopping to chat with different groups, soaking in the sense of community that had become the foundation of the program. It was a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time, one of pure connection, without the pressure of running a program, making decisions, or managing logistics. After dinner, they gathered around a large bonfire, the crackling flames casting a warm glow over the group. Margaret stood before them, her heart full. She didn't need to say much, she just needed to be present, to remind them that they were all part of something meaningful. "Thank you for being here," Margaret said, her voice filled with gratitude. "Tonight is about you. It's about reconnecting, sharing, and most of all, remembering why we're here. We've built something incredible, and I'm so proud of what each of you has contributed. This program wouldn't be what it is without you." The crowd fell silent for a moment, then a senior named Helen, who had been part of the program since the beginning, stood up. She was a woman in her late 60s with a gentle smile and a fierce determination. "Margaret," Helen began, her voice carrying across the circle, "when I first came to this program, I was unsure. I had no idea what to expect, but I knew I needed something. What I found here wasn't just a place to pass time, it was a place to live. I've met lifelong friends, I've rediscovered purpose, and most importantly, I've felt like I matter. We all matter." Helen's words struck a chord with everyone in the circle. A few tears were shed, but they were tears of gratitude and recognition. This program had given them something priceless, a sense of belonging. The evening continued with stories, songs, and laughter. The seniors shared memories of their past, their struggles, and their triumphs. Some told jokes, others sang, and some just listened, soaking in the warmth of the community. It was a night that reminded them all of the power of connection. The retreat was a turning point for the program. It reminded everyone of what they had built, and it refocused their attention on the importance of relationships. As Margaret reflected on the experience, she knew that this was what the program was all about, creating a space where people could come together, support one another, and thrive. In the weeks that followed, Margaret felt a renewed sense of purpose. The retreat had reminded her that the strength of the program didn't come from its size or its funding, it came from the people who made it what it was. The community was the heart, and as long as they kept that at the center of everything, the program would continue to grow and succeed. And with that, Margaret knew that the best was yet to come. The weeks following the retreat were filled with new energy. The seniors, rejuvenated by their shared experiences and strengthened connections, returned to the program with a renewed sense of purpose. Margaret watched in awe as the ripple effect of their retreat began to spread. New ideas, new initiatives, and new opportunities were surfacing. The community was not just participating, it was leading, creating, and expanding. One day, Margaret received a message from Sarah, one of the senior mentors. She had an exciting proposal. "Margaret, we've been talking, and we think it's time to take this program to the next level. We want to start a mentorship program, an initiative where our seniors can mentor younger generations. It's about giving back, sharing wisdom, and creating a legacy that transcends generations. What do you think?" Margaret couldn't contain her excitement. The idea was brilliant. It was exactly what the program needed to continue evolving, seniors taking on leadership roles and mentoring the younger community members. It would be a way for the older generation to feel valued, while also helping to bridge the gap between the young and the old. She immediately called a meeting with her team. They discussed the logistics, the impact, and the way they could make this mentorship program something that truly served both sides, helping seniors feel empowered and giving younger individuals a chance to learn from years of life experience. As the team brainstormed, it became clear that this wasn't just about one-on-one mentorship. It could expand into group workshops, online webinars, and even community projects. The possibilities were endless. They could create a space where both the seniors and younger participants could share knowledge, collaborate, and support one another. Over the next few weeks, the mentorship program began to take shape. They created a training program for both the seniors and the younger ments, ensuring that both groups understood the dynamics of mentorship and how to approach one another with respect, empathy, and understanding. Soon after the announcement, a group of young people, college students, aspiring professionals, and even young families, signed up to participate. They were eager to learn from the wealth of knowledge that the seniors had to offer. But what surprised Margaret the most was how eager the seniors were to get started. They were ready to step up and share their experiences, to pass on their wisdom, and to make a lasting impact. At the first mentorship meetup, Margaret could feel the energy in the room. It was electric, like the beginning of something new and transformative. The seniors, who had once been unsure of their own place in the world, were now standing tall as mentors. The younger participants, full of ambition and curiosity, were eager to hear what their mentors had to say. Margaret couldn't help but smile as she walked around, observing the interactions. The seniors were sharing their life stories, offering advice on everything from career decisions to relationships, to navigating the challenges of life in a fast-changing world. The young ments were soaking it all in, asking questions and listening intently. One of the seniors, a woman named Marjorie, had been in the program since its early days. In her late 70s, Marjorie was a retired professor with a wealth of knowledge to share. Today, she was paired with a young woman named Rachel, a college student who was struggling to find direction in her life. Marjorie smiled warmly at Rachel, settling into the armchair next to her. "Tell me, Rachel," she said, "what brings you here today?" Rachel hesitated for a moment before answering. I feel lost," she admitted. "I'm trying to figure out what to do with my life, but everything feels so uncertain. I just don't know where to start." Marjorie nodded thoughtfully. "I understand," she said gently. When I was your age, I felt the same way. It took me years to figure out what truly mattered to me. But one thing I learned was that it's okay not to have everything figured out. Life is about exploring, learning, and sometimes, making mistakes. What's most important is that you stay true to yourself. That's where you'll find your purpose. Rachel's eyes lit up. That's really comforting to hear. Marjorie smiled. I'm glad. Now, tell me about the things you love to do. What makes you feel alive? As Rachel began to open up, Margaret watched from across the room. She could see the connection growing between the two, the spark of a real mentorship forming. Marjorie wasn't just offering advice, she was showing Rachel that her feelings of uncertainty were valid, that she wasn't alone in her journey. And that was the power of the mentorship program. It was about connection, understanding, and sharing the wisdom that comes with life experience. Meanwhile, other seniors were engaging in similar conversations with their ments. Some were discussing business ventures, others were offering guidance on personal relationships, while others still were helping the young people navigate the emotional ups and downs of life. Margaret couldn't help but feel a sense of pride as she moved around the room. This was the future of the program, seniors empowering younger generations and, in turn, finding purpose and fulfillment themselves. The ripple effect of the retreat was starting to spread, and this new mentorship initiative was just the beginning. She realized that in many ways, the program had come full circle. What had started as a simple mission to support and connect seniors had now blossomed into a multi-generational effort, a movement that was about shared learning, mutual support, and creating legacies. Over the next few months, the mentorship program continued to grow, and more people, young and old, became involved. The impact was felt not just in the program, but in the wider community as well. Stories of the program's success began to spread, and soon, Margaret received an invitation to speak at a conference on aging and intergenerational relationships. It was an honor, but Margaret knew that the real credit belonged to the people who had made it happen. The seniors who had become mentors, the younger participants who had opened their hearts to learning, and the entire community that had supported the program from the start. At the conference, Margaret shared her vision for the future, one where seniors were not seen as a demographic to be cared for, but as invaluable resources who could lead, mentor, and inspire. She spoke about the power of intergenerational connection and how it had transformed lives. The response was overwhelming. As the year drew to a close, Margaret found herself reflecting on the incredible journey they had taken together. What had started as a small idea to help seniors find connection had grown into something far greater, something that transcended age, experience, and background. It was a movement that was changing lives, not just of the seniors involved, but of everyone who came into contact with the program. Margaret sat down one evening to write in her journal, reflecting on the milestones they had reached, the obstacles they had overcome, and the lessons they had learned along the way. She had come so far from the days of uncertainty, and now, more than ever, she understood the importance of what they had built. It wasn't just a program, it was a legacy. And in that moment, Margaret knew one thing for certain: the story of the program was far from over. This was only the beginning. The last few months had flown by, and Margaret found herself standing at the podium at the annual community event, a gathering that had once felt impossible to imagine but was now an incredible reality. What began as a small initiative to help seniors connect and find purpose had blossomed into something that was changing lives in ways Margaret never thought possible. She could hardly believe it. It was a crisp winter evening, and the venue was filled with bright faces. Seniors and younger participants, families, mentors, and ments, all gathered to celebrate the culmination of another successful year. The room was buzzing with laughter and conversation, a testament to the connections that had been made. Margaret took a deep breath, her heart swelling with pride. This wasn't just a celebration of numbers or programs. This was a celebration of people, real, vibrant individuals who had discovered new meaning in their lives, who had made a difference in each other's worlds, and who had created something far beyond a mere initiative. They had created a community, a living, breathing entity made up of stories, experiences, and shared love. Margaret stepped up to the microphone and looked out over the crowd. For a brief moment, she felt the weight of everything they had built together. The challenges, the triumphs, the moments of doubt and the moments of joy. It had all led her here, to this very moment. She had poured her heart and soul into this program, but what truly moved her now was the realization that it had never been just about her. It had been about everyone who had been touched by it. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I stand before you today, amazed and in awe of what we've all created together. What started as a small idea, a simple dream to help seniors find a sense of purpose and connection, has turned into something far greater. We've built a community, a family, really, that stretches across generations." The room fell silent as everyone turned their attention toward her. Each one of you here today has been a part of this journey, and you've all contributed something unique and special to this program. Whether you're a senior who has found new purpose as a mentor, a young person who has discovered the invaluable wisdom of those who have walked this earth before you, or someone who has found a new family within these walls, you are what makes this program what it is. Margaret paused, scanning the faces in the crowd. She saw Helen, the mentor who had shared so many heartfelt moments with her ments. There was Sarah, the program's senior mentor, beaming with pride. She could even spot Rachel, who had blossomed under the guidance of Marjorie. There was a sense of belonging in the room, a quiet strength that radiated from every individual present. Margaret took a deep breath before continuing, her voice stronger now. "We've shared stories, laughter, tears, and struggles. We've supported one another, learned from one another, and uplifted each other. We've proved that no matter your age, no matter your background, you can always learn, grow, and give back. And that's the greatest gift we can offer, the gift of love, purpose, and connection." A wave of emotion swept over Margaret. This was more than a program. This was a movement, a reminder to everyone in the room that life was meant to be lived, at any age. The mentorship program, the community events, the retreats, everything they had built was now part of a greater legacy. A legacy that would continue to grow and touch lives for years to come. Margaret paused again, this time for effect. She wanted her next words to land, to remind everyone of the power of what they had accomplished. This is just the beginning. Our work isn't done yet. The legacy we've built here will live on long after this event ends. We've sparked something within each other that can't be extinguished. The beauty of this program is that it's not just about us, it's about the future. We are teaching the next generation the value of connection, the importance of family, and the strength of community. And that, my friends, is something that will last forever. The crowd erupted into applause, and Margaret felt her heart soar. She wasn't sure when exactly it had happened, but somewhere along the way, the program had transformed into something bigger than all of them. It had become a force for change, for connection, and for love. As the applause subsided, Margaret took a moment to collect herself. She felt at peace, knowing that the community they had built was in good hands. The seniors who had once felt isolated were now thriving, and the younger generations were learning the invaluable lessons of empathy, resilience, and wisdom. They had come together to build something that transcended age, something that united them all in ways they had never imagined. Later that evening, as the celebration continued, Margaret found herself sitting alone for a brief moment, reflecting on everything that had brought her here. The program had grown far beyond her original vision, and she couldn't help but smile. She thought back to her early days, when she had been unsure if this idea could even work. She had felt a deep sense of doubt, questioning if she was the right person to lead such an initiative. But now, as she looked around at the vibrant community before her, she knew without a doubt that they had achieved something remarkable. Her phone buzzed, and she glanced down to see a message from Dr. Thomas, the program's advisor. "You've done something amazing here, Margaret. You've built a legacy. Be proud of what you've accomplished." Margaret smiled, her eyes glistening with tears. Yes, they had built a legacy, together. And in that moment, Margaret knew that the work they had started would continue long after she was gone. The ripple effect of their love and connection would last for generations to come. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?